So good afternoon. My name is Isabella Zano, and I am the proud principal of Kendrick Elementary School located in South Waco. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to this month's Hispanic Leaders Network virtual monthly luncheon presentation. The Hispanic Leaders Network, or HLN, is a group of Hispanic leaders who are passionate and deeply vested in supporting current and future leaders. Our vision is to develop and empower current and future leaders to make a difference in the community. Our mission is to provide personal, cultural, and professional opportunities to inspire Hispanic leaders to serve and make a positive impact. The HLN operates as a committee of the Centex Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Today, the Hispanic Leaders Network brings to you a special message from Waco Police Department Commander Pedro Soto as he shares the story of becoming a leader. Also, there will be a networking activity at the end of the program. For the Facebook Live participants, you will need to be logged into Zoom to participate. You can go to the HLN Facebook page to find the Eventbrite Zoom registration link.
Dear Lord Jesus, we thank you for this gathering. We thank you for the Hispanic Leaders Network and the people behind the scenes who are guiding, Lord Jesus, to inspire future and current Hispanic leaders in our community. Lord Jesus, we pray for Commander Pedro Soto that he will bring word to our community that will inspire us and should share his journey to the road of him being a leader in our community. Lord Jesus, I pray that you just guide this meeting and bless everyone who's online. In your name we pray. Amen. Hello, everyone. My name is Elaine Borteo, and I am one of the advisory committee members on the Hispanic Leaders Network. I'm also a business owner, the Victory Employer Services, but it is my pleasure to introduce to you Commander Pedro Soto, who was actually born and raised in the north part of Fort Worth, Texas. He grew up in a small, predominantly Chicano community, most referred to as Diamond Hill. He attended the local high school where he was active in sports and academic social clubs. Commander Soto moved to Waco in September 2000 after being hired as an officer for the Waco Police Department. He currently serves as a platoon commander for the midnight shift. In his 20-year career span with the Waco Police Department, he was promoted multiple times in various roles. Since day one, Commander has been driven by his passion for the Waco community, and as a result, to improve his skill and expertise, and while working full-time, he pursued his education, earning a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Texas at Arlington in 2002. He earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Washington State University in 2018. He was awarded the Outstanding Graduate Award for the Justice Program, and after being promoted to commander, he graduated from the Institute of Law Enforcement Administration School of Executive Leadership and received the Institute's prestigious Professionalism Award. He has also been the recipient of the Police Department's Police Commendation Certificate of Merit and Meritorious Unit Award in 2018. He was selected as the Agency Supervisor of the Year. Commander Soto is a member of the Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas, the Waco Political Action Committee, and the Waco Police Association. He is active in the community and mentoring junior high and high school students in the importance of education and being good stewards of their neighborhood. His commitment to diversity and inclusiveness makes him ideal for working with the youth of Waco. Commander Soto is married to Norma Soto, and they have a handsome son, Blade. In his spare time, Commander Soto enjoys competitive fishing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and spending time outdoors. Commander Soto's extended bio can be found on the HLN website at hln-waco.org. Commander Soto, you have an impressive background, and I'm excited for you to share your story about the road to becoming a leader. I give it to you, Commander Soto.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate everybody joining today. It's an honor to be here. You'll have to excuse, this is my first Zoom meeting. They normally don't allow us to answer police-related calls through Zoom, so it'll take some getting used to. One of the notes I was given when I told people about coming on and doing a Zoom meeting was to make sure that I didn't hit the mute button. So I'm going to try to keep my hands off the computer. If I do hit the mute button, the universal sign for, hey, I can't hear you will work, and I'm sure I'll figure out what I did wrong. I believe that there at the end, there's some time set aside for some Q&A. So if you have any questions, if you would just save them to then, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you all have. There's also going to be a PowerPoint presentation. I want to warn everybody that's watching. We have all been through phases in our lives where the hairdo does not match your current hairdo now, so please be gentle. As we get started, one of the themes that I would say my life has pretty much revolved around, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward. And that has been basically the theme of my life growing up and even through my career. That's to always keep moving forward. At times I'll be flying, other times I'll be crawling. But it's basically served as a theme throughout my career. If we're ready to get started, I'll begin where most stories begin, and that will be at the beginning. So again, you guys heard that I grew up in a small community. Most people that live in North Fort Worth would refer to it as Diamond Hill. If you'll go to the first slide, or the next slide, excuse me.
Just 1 second.
All right.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. Just 1 second. There we go.
Again, excuse the hairdo. The community I grew up in was predominantly Hispanic. It was a small, well-knit community. It was the kind of community where everybody had my mother's phone number, and that's probably where the neighborhood watch started, because, or at least originated, because anytime they saw us and it was during school hours, they would make calling my mother and asking us where we're supposed to be. But it was a very, very tight community. My parents, my mom and dad were not the most educated, but they were very wise. My father made it to the 7th grade before he started to work to support his family. My mother made it to the 11th grade. Nobody in my family at that time, in my immediate family, had any experience with college. The idea never even came into play, but they were hard workers. I think my work ethic came from them. My father worked 2 jobs, worked for the city of Fort Worth, and then would cut grass on the weekends to make ends meet. My mother was a convenience store clerk and worked in the cleaners, doing all this to support us, to support the family, and make sure that we didn't go without. We may not have always had what we wanted, but we definitely had what we needed. We weren't rich by any means, but the one thing we were always rich in was family. My education was the next step. If you want to go to the next slide, especially when I got into high school. Elementary school, middle school, and high school was all through the same neighborhood. We kind of just all stayed in that area. It wasn't the safest neighborhoods to grow up in. There was always there were always gangs, drugs, opportunities to stray from the path of success is what I would say. But because of my parents and their ability to keep us on that straight and narrow, we never ran into those problems. But one of the things I'll say is that one of the escapes for me was school. I was able to go there and learn, educate myself, and I could play sports. It was one place where I could go, and I found my outlet. So if there are any educators in the room, number one, I want to thank you. You may not know this now, but you are having an impact on the kids that you have gone through. You have gone through your classrooms, through your schools. You are having an impact. You may not hear about it for a while, for a few years, or maybe they tell you immediately, but you are having an impact. So I want to thank you. I can still remember the teachers that were in my life that made an impact. Miss Kleinschmidt, Miss Baird, Coach Grant, and of course, Miss Joy Funicello. And that goes to one of my best friends is probably on here watching. She'll remember that name. So I want to say thank you. Those educators inspired me at the time to get my education, probably started me on my path to the leadership and making a difference. My first experience with leadership wasn't the best. It's actually what inspired me. I remember we were playing in a basketball game, and Coach Robinson was there. He coached basketball and football, and seconds on the clock, we were losing, down by 1. And he looked at me and said, "Hey, I want you to take the last shot." Well, I'd never felt that pressure before. Being freshman, sophomore, high school kid, I shied away from it. I actually told him, "No, I don't want to do it." And he actually gave it. I recommended that somebody else take the shot. Well, after the game was over, I can't tell you who won or lost that day, but after the game was over, what gave me the most, or what had the most impact on me, was meeting with him afterwards. He was in the locker room doing laundry, and I remember walking up to him, and he said, "I was really looking for a leader today, and I was expecting it to be you." I felt horrible when I walked away from there. I disappointed him in filling a leadership role that I could have easily done, but I shied away from it. I told myself that day that would never happen again. Even as a young man, I never wanted to feel that feeling of shying away from an opportunity. If you'll go to the next slide. My education, and I keep saying that, I know I keep referring to that, and you'll probably hear it a few more times, because of the fact of growing up in a poor neighborhood, we didn't have all the opportunities that some of the more economically endowed neighborhoods did. So education was our way out, our way to experience those things. It led me to Colorado, which I'd never been outside of my own community, but I was able to go to a leadership camp because of my grades. I was able to go to student athlete trips. At one point, I was recognized because of my grades and my activity with sports as one of the Texas Rangers student athletes, and I was even able to go to an away game and seeing outside of the world. And I don't want to quote Aladdin here, but it was a whole new world. It really was. You can thank my nieces and nephews for those Disney references. But it really was. It changed my life, and seeing those things, and I wanted more of that. I wanted to experience those things, and I knew that the key to that was my education and learning to lead. After experiencing the outside influences that I saw, I worked harder and harder and ended up graduating second in my high school class. I was a salutatorian. My best friend Josh, I don't know if he's on right now, but he actually beat me by 0.006. And to this day, I still remember that number, but I think most of it was because he gave a present to whoever was calculating those. I'm just going to say that right now. Now, it could have been worse. I could have been third, which my other best friend, Roxanne, who is currently doing an election for the school board for Fort Worth ISD, she ended up in third. So I always give her a hard time about that. I could have been third. But it kept me grounded, and it kind of led my way into a new experience, which was college. It was very new. I was not ready for that experience. I'm telling you now, where we came from, I struggled. If you remember my initial theme, this is where I really was crawling. I had a hard time initially. I think my first semester, I was around a 2.5 as a GPA, but I still remembered my parents' work ethic and them telling me and supporting me and saying, even my aunt Peggy, who would tell me all the time, you can do this. You can do this. Put one foot in front of the other. They always say that the longest journey to travel is from your mouth to the first footstep. And that's very true. But one of the things that stuck with me as I went to a class, I was in class, and while I was there, a professor stood up front and he said, "What would you do today if you knew you could not fail?" And then he paused and he looked at the classroom, gave it a second, and he said, "Now go do it." And that stuck with me. That stuck with me to the point that when I left that classroom, the first thing I recognized was that, or I looked for, was ways to improve my standing, my grades, and opportunities. So I started to get involved in the educational programs that were offered, tutors, group meetings with other students that were struggling, and we worked together because I knew that I wanted more. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to be in those roles. So my sophomore year, as it progressed, my grades got better. I was involved in some of the organizations there, and there was a frequent question being asked, a consistent question being asked, and that was, "What do you want to be? What is your major? Where do you want to go from here?" That was tough being a 18, 19-year-old kid. I had no idea, but I remembered I liked math. You know what? I like math. I want to be an engineer. I want to be an engineer, right? And I did great in math up until we got to calculus 2. And I walked into that classroom. I remember the final to this day. I remember the final that day. It was the Pythagorean theorem. We all know it works. No issue with that. But what he asked was, how do we know it works? So you had to prove why that worked. An hour and a half later and 6 pages back in front, I walked out of that classroom and said, "You know what? I don't like math anymore. I don't want to be an engineer anymore." That changed me as well. But I knew that wasn't my path anymore. So then I started to look around, and I started not really sure where I wanted to go at that point, but I remember a conversation with my aunt. She may not remember this conversation, but I still to this day remember it. We were having a discussion about a funeral that she had just recently attended. And the discussion, she said, "Well, people will remember him for the good he did, the people that he helped out, and how he treated those people." And it was for the first time I had been introduced to the idea of a legacy, what we left behind, what will we be remembered for, the things that we do. And before that happened, I remember doing an exercise in the classroom, and it was also a leadership classroom that I went to, where they said, "We want you to write your own eulogy." And there's some truth to that. You want to remember what you were, or you want to know what you're going to be remembered for. Those are the things you're going to leave behind. So that stuck with me. So I was trying to consider, how would I make a difference in this? And the idea of making a difference became an idea. But what was key for me was I wanted a career that not only made a difference, but was presented with challenges and daily change. So I started to look around, and I heard about policing. And there was an internship at South Lake Police Department, and I applied. Who would have thought that some young kid, and if you'll go to the next slide, I'm sorry, I missed a few. I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah, these were some of the accolades that I received in school, those academic accolades. Again, excuse the hair, because I know those jokes are probably coming in my chat here in a little bit. Go ahead and go one more. One more. Go ahead. One more. Again. Okay. So we'll stop right there. Go back one. There you go. So when I got into, when I was accepted to South Lake Police Department as an intern, again, everything changed. It's where I first found the love of policing, right? And this is where I also met one of the most impactful people in my life as well. His name is Robert Finn. He later became a chief, and he was, at the time, he probably didn't even know that I considered him a mentor. He helped me get to those positions. And it's odd that I say mentor. Most people don't know they were mentors at the time that they're doing it, until somebody speaks about it or says, "Hey, I appreciate it." But he made a difference. He showed me, and I was witness to, what a challenging career would be, the different changes, and where I could make a difference. When I say that he made an entrance or an impact, he probably doesn't even know about that now until you start talking about him in speeches, and then say, "Hey, that probably was the first time that he'd ever heard about it or appreciate the impact." Now, there are some people that know about the impacts that they made in your life. I base that on the fact that both my parents, my wife, and my aunt know that, because their Christmas gifts and Christmas wishes seem to getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I'm assuming they know. But at Southlink, it was one of the times I began to experience my first formal role as a leader. They were going through an accreditation, which is where they certify a department based on standards and policies. And I was having officers come to me, and I would have to implement these policies or help them understand them. And these were people with several years of police experience. But I was able to lead by explaining the demands of the accreditation process. And it was an eye opener. The fact that amount of responsibility was placed on my shoulders, and that they believed in me enough to handle it. It was a little scary, but like I said before, I wouldn't shy away from it. And as luck would have it, while I was there doing all this, I was sorting the mail one day, and a flyer from the Waco Police Department comes through, and I'm like, I saw it, and I was, "Hey, they're hiring police officers. You know what? I can do that. I can do that." Well, mind you, it said that you had to be 21. Of course, I looked at the fine print, and it said 21 by graduation date. At the time, I was 20. When I first applied, I said, "There's no way I can get this job. There's no way. I'm only 20. There's got to be." There were 362 applicants. They were looking for 16 people. In my mind, I'm thinking, "There's no way." But I wasn't going to shy away. So I applied, and in September of 2000, I joined the Waco Police Academy. One of the interesting things about being 20 years old in the academy is that we have firearms qualifications. We have to be 21 to buy bullets. So I had to have other people buy them for me just so I could qualify. That's how young I was when I first started. But I also, the other thing is, to pursue this career, I had to put my education on hold. It was a hard decision, but I feel that I made the right one. I went into policing and put my education on hold. Policing did several things. It made me mature faster. It helped me grow, and it also put me in leadership roles. I would refer to it as like drinking water through a fire hose, is what it felt like on certain days. But it was fun. And I still get excited when I talk about being a young officer. After being there and getting through the academy, I was assigned to a squad and became comfortable. And after a few years of perfecting my craft, I started looking for new challenges. So I joined the SWAT team. I became a field training officer, an instructor for the academy. All of these had informal roles that were considered leadership roles. I still remember one of my beat partners, when I promoted the first time, he said, "You've always been," his name is Babe Torres, and he's probably watching as well, but he said, "You've always been a leader. You just didn't have the stripes." So I appreciated him saying that. At the time, I didn't feel that way. But again, I think a lot of us don't know the impact we have, or we're filling roles, and at times we're not even aware of them. The idea, though, of becoming a formal leader within the department hadn't really crossed my mind. I didn't feel I was ready yet. I needed to become a more well-rounded officer. So at that point is when I decided, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to finish my degree. So going to school working full time and then going to school part time, became a walk for me. Now I'd reached obstacles where I was having to study late at night, try to find time to do projects. It became difficult, several obstacles. And having a shift work when you work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 1 a.m. isn't the most conducive way to do it. But like I said, I wouldn't shy away from those roles. I kept moving forward. Even though I was walking, like Dr. Martin Luther King said, I was moving forward and I wasn't going to stop. It was during this time, though, that I was presented with some issues like in the Cape Ross area. And I'll never forget, we spent beat partners and other officers spent a lot of time in that area to address the gang and drug problem. And I'll never forget, a woman came outside one time and told me, when you and Officer Torres are here, that's the only time that I let my kids come out and play. When I know you guys are in the neighborhood, I let them come out and play. That made me feel really good. And at that point is when I start to feel that impact that I had in the neighborhoods and the citizens of Waco. And I wanted to do more, and I kept doing more. And that's when I started to get involved in the local community when we would visit schools, mentor some of the youth. I'd always been involved in the community where I came from, so I wanted to carry that on now that I felt comfortable in the position. And when I would meet with kids, when it wasn't that I was gullible, I just wanted to see them smile. So most of the times they would convince me that the only way they could listen to some of the discussions I would have with them is if I bought them pizza. So me and Domino's were like this for a very long time. But as the years went on, there was a very particular young man that I was in Estella Maxey. He was 5 at the time, but every time I would see him, he would come up and run, say hi, and he'd just want to sit there and ask questions and talk about my equipment. And I noticed that at the time he was living with grandma, parents weren't involved, and I knew he needed a positive influence. I needed to be an impact in his life, like other people had been an impact in my life. So what I would do is on Thursdays, or once a week, I would meet him by the school bus and I'd bring donuts because kids don't pay attention unless you have food, or at least they won't stay still unless they're eating. So I'd bring donuts and we sit there and talk about his day, talk about everything from school to his favorite TV show. And I just wanted him to have those interactions that I know was missing. And it wasn't until recently that I realized just how much those little meetings or those times meant to him. He's 15 now. And a few years ago, maybe even a year ago, he pulled me aside. He said, "Do you remember those talks with the donuts? Do you remember you coming over with Christmas gifts or taking me off my birthday?" I said, "Yeah, of course I do. I remember those." I said, "Because my bank account won't let me forget." But he said, "I want to tell you, thank you." He said, "You made me feel like I was important." He said, "You made me feel like someone cared." Right? That, if you're not crying now, or if you are, I'm sorry. But that had a huge impact. Like I said, he was 5 at the first time I met him. He's 15 now. He's a high school student, active in as many sports as he can get his hands on. But because of COVID, he's not as involved. But he's a good kid. On the weekends, he comes over, hangs out with my son, who's 18. Most of the time, I find them raiding my refrigerator. But that was one of the people that I could touch, one of the people that I could impact. And I know it made him feel great. And the residual effect was for me to feel good after I heard that from him. So when I say that leadership roles or people in your life, you can impact them and not even know it. So remember that when you're out here and you see these kids and they just want your attention for a little bit, take the opportunity, take the time, bring them in, buy them a donut. For whatever reason, they seem to think donuts and cops, they go together. I won't make any jokes, and in the chat, I'm sure there'll be some. So during my time at the police department, received several awards and accolades. If you want to go to the next slide. But now I was starting to consider working towards that promotion, and kind of started preparing for a sergeant's test. But I was also about to graduate with my degree. And this is when I felt like I was crawling, preparing for a promotion, preparing for a graduation, the final test. But I kept moving forward. I kept saying, this is going to pay off. This is going to be, in the end of this, you're going to appreciate what you did, what you've done, and the impact that you've had on yourself, family, friends, and other acquaintances. So graduated, and then shortly after that, I received my bachelor's degree. And the promotions list came up after I tested for it, and I ended up getting second. I don't know what the deal is with me getting second, but it happened again. But I did. I scored high enough that I promoted. Received my own squad, and I started to actually become now more of a formal leader. There were obstacles, side steps, mistakes. You're gonna make them. Just make sure that you don't make them again, and you keep moving forward. You keep trying to better yourself, not just for you, but if you remember the impact you have on those surrounding you, the people that you're leading. That is the key. Granted, at first I had no idea what I was doing, but if you keep pushing forward, I promise you, with experience, you will find out what works, what's good for you, and for your team, and you'll succeed. The key is to continue to move forward. So in 2018, this was probably the year that I was flying, or at least it felt like time flew. How's that? But in 2018, or excuse me, let me just take one step back. I apologize. If you'll go to the next slide. Between promoting as a sergeant, the next thing I did, one more slide, I'm sorry. After promoting as a sergeant and took over my first platoon, I became a family violence sergeant, a detective sergeant. I really enjoyed it. I think that's where I learned a lot about my department. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about how to lead. At the same time, I was also getting my finishing up on my master's degree. Most of the conversations that I would have with people is they'd ask me how do I do it, and again, I'd go back to you just got to push through. You got to push through and have a great support system. My wife, amazing, and I'll get to her in a minute. I promise you I didn't forget. She might be thinking I did, but I swear I did not. She has a place in my presentation as well. But I succeeded. I made it through. I received my master's degree in 2018. I also, at the same time, I guess I didn't have enough challenges. I went ahead and took the test to promote to commander. If you'll go to the next slide. And I was lucky enough that this time I placed first. There was no number two anymore. But I placed first, and I was promoted to commander. I left a great group of individuals from the family violence unit, and then went back to patrol, where again, now I wasn't just leading first line officers or first line detectives. I was now leading leaders, sergeants now, and these first line supervisors now that I was responsible for. But I didn't shy away from it. And like I said in my, what Martin Luther King said, is I felt like I was flying now. And I know I don't like to use these types of phrases, but unbeknownst to me, when this was going on, I later find out that I was given the Supervisor of the Year award, which was an awesome feeling. I didn't even know that I was even considered, but I appreciated the accolade, but what else it did for me was it told me that, you know what you're doing is you're doing the right thing. You're doing what you're supposed to do. I was actually leading and having feedback that what I was doing was working. The after that and completing my master's degree and receiving the other accolades of being the graduate, the outstanding graduate for the agents for the criminal justice department at Tarleton. That was a great feeling too. I didn't even know what a 4.0 felt like in grad school, but it was nice. And all of this would not have been achieved without that support system and having those impacts in my life. And this is where I get to my wife. I can't thank her enough. Without her support, none of this would have been achievable. She knows that, or at least I tell her as much as I can, that I appreciate everything she does. And I hope you all have this same type of support system. I try to show her by cooking for her, but we normally end up in the emergency room and stuff like that happens. So I kind of stay away from that type of appreciation. But I think she knows that I really appreciate everything she's done. And as far as moving forward and the what the future holds for me, my goal is to continue to have an impact in not only the people that work for me, but the family and friends that are around me, to continue to climb that ladder, to have as much influence and impact on those people around me, even at work, whatever the next step is. One thing that I will tell you too is that if you notice, I don't know if they can see it on the screen, and if you'll go to the next slide, I'm sorry, I missed that. One more. There you go. One of the things I'll tell you is that if you see it right there talking about one day, you'll informally have these conversations about where you want to go in your life, and you'll always say, well, one day I'll get there. You know, one day I said I'm going to be a sergeant. All right. One day I said I'm going to get my bachelor's degree, and one day I'm going to be a commander. One day I'm going to get my master's. What I would strongly tell you is that be prepared for that one day, because it's coming. It's coming. And fortune will always favor the bold. So when it comes, be ready for that one day. I'll leave you with the same thing that I started with. Remember, if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. And if you can't walk, crawl. But always keep moving forward. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. And if you guys have any questions, I'm open to anything.
Okay, so I think Commander Soto, we have some questions.
Okay.
And sorry, Elaine informed me about 2 seconds ago that I was going to be reading these, so you're going to have to bear with me.
Okay.
Let's see. Mr. Thomas would like to know, what advice would you give to someone trying to bring the leadership potential out in someone, the leadership that you see in them?
I would probably say that what has helped me is, number one, acknowledging that potential, because some people don't know that they have that ability within them. Some people aren't aware that they can lead. So first I would acknowledge, hey, I recognize these things in you. I recognize that you have these abilities, and let them know. The next step I would do is have them see what you do, right? Whether that be follow you around for that day. I would also recommend reading is key. As I climbed that ladder, I found that reading these leadership books has always helped. But being that mentor, even though you would probably, most people who lead and mentor don't recognize themselves or don't say, hey, I was a mentor. But taking that role and filling it will acknowledge those. And I think that is probably the best way for them to learn.
Let's see. Israel, how has your experience been in your work as a minority?
So, personally, I've never had any issues with the fact of being a minority. I'm assuming that the question is phrased more at, have I had any additional obstacles as being a minority and having to address those concerns? I can tell you that with the Waco Police Department, I've always had I've always had a positive interaction. I haven't had to deal with racism or any of those issues that you would associate with the fact that I'm Hispanic. I just haven't come across them. We're very diverse. The city manager, the chief, the police department has made every effort, and I've even been a part of some of the recruiting and the hiring. So I've seen how they've tried to make these impacts and adopt to the changes that are coming. So personally, I've never experienced it. I pretty much had a fair shake throughout. So I really can't elaborate much more than that. I hope that answers your question.
Let's see, we have another one here. What if you could describe, briefly what community policing is and how we as community leaders can help?
Okay. So community policing, to me, is being involved. We actually have, the department was approved for, I know they put this out, but we're looking at doing a neighborhood enforcement team where they become more involved with the community and the organizations that are out there that would have the most impact. Some of the best ways that I would say that the community can be involved is we have some programs at the department that are the Citizens Police Academy, where you can come in and see what officers go through. You get to experience calls, do a ride along. Most people really enjoy the driving fast on our driving track, so they come in and experience that part of it, of the Community Police Academy, or the Citizen Police Academy, excuse me. But at least that is our bridge to get to understand what you guys, and you can have questions. And a lot of times, most people call the police because they're having a bad time in their life. Something went wrong that that brought us into that significant situation. So they don't have the time to ask other questions that would be more community oriented or community related. So I always make the suggestion that either having a ride along or coming in and doing a Citizens Police Academy is probably one of the best experience you would be able to get and have that firsthand knowledge.
And let's see, what are your what's your next step? I know a guy in your situation or position probably is unable to sit still for very long.
So it was funny that you mentioned that. I was talking to Elaine about that before, and I said, right now, one of the things that I had mentioned to her was, right now I feel like I'm crawling / walking, because the next step requires some years of experience. And being a commander, I've only got a couple of years under my belt. So right now I'm taking the time to educate myself, attend some leadership courses. I'm really there's one in Boston that I'm looking to sign up for next. But yes, the next step will be a chief level position. So I'm really looking forward to having that impact and watching the agency grow as I do that. And
let's see, I believe Ms. Salas says her son is starting the police academy in Hearn, Texas on the 27th, and she would like to know what advice you might give her as a mom and her son as a new recruit going forward.
Well, I'll start off with this. The mom worries will always be there. Even if he's having a wonderful day, he could be a cashier, and I promise you're still going to worry. And I'm sure as a police officer, she's going to be even more worried, because I get phone calls regularly from my mother who asks me just how I'm doing. How's everything going? So the worrying part will not go away. It's always going to be there. But to give you some advice about your son and joining the academy or his interest in the police academy, I would definitely do a ride along. I would go out there, get into a vehicle with an officer. I know with COVID right now, they're limiting some of those things. But if you can't get involved that way, the Citizen Police Academy is another route. They have a lot of information on the internet with regards to the cities that he's applying in. So you said Hearn. And if not, contact the recruiter. start asking them questions, and they can also give you ideas or different paths or facets for him to get involved.
All right. Let's see. I believe that. I think we have any more questions. Okay, so Commander, I really want to sincerely thank you for sharing your story about your road to leadership. My uncle, Captain Rodriguez, after World War II, was with Waco PD until he retired in 1990. And when I was a kid, he would always talk about the responsibilities that came with putting that uniform on, what it represented, and what a privilege it was to wear it every day. So I think from all of us, you and those like you who serve really serve as an inspiration to all of us. And I want to thank you for your work and the work you've done and the work you're going to continue to do, and for making time for all of us to be here. So I believe now we're going to break into groups for a few minutes. I think Elaine's going to handle everything as far as the IT goes, so we won't have to do anything. And I believe it's around 10 minutes, maybe we'll find out, but it's going to happen automatically. And so once you're in your groups, if you could introduce yourselves and then discuss, I believe the question we're going to discuss is, how do you see the work that HLN is doing as being vital to the community?
Thank you, Angelo. We are going to be breaking out into 6 rooms. And so, yeah, I would say about 10 minutes. Introduce yourself. And can you, one more time, Angelo, what question will they be asking when we come back? I mean, answering.
What do you see the work that the Hispanic Leadership Network is doing as being vital, or how do you see it as being vital to the community?
Great. Okay. Here we go. And you probably, if you would just pay attention to what room you're in once I send you out. Here you go. Okay, Angelo. So what was that question again? And then we will go ahead and start with group 1. Trying to see if group 1's on yet. I think they're still talking. And ask them to share out on that question. So go ahead. What was that question?
The question was, how do you see the work that the Hispanic Leadership Network is doing as being vital to the community?
All right, great. Is anyone from group 1 on? I think Felicia Cruz, you were in group 1. Are you on? Anyone else that was in that group?
Yeah, it was me, Felicia, Commander Soto, and Dr. Newman and Bridget.
Okay, great. So would you mind, Dr. Luevanos, sharing out what did your group discuss on how HLN has benefited, or how is it benefiting the community?
I think the vital importance here is voice, representation, and resource. I think those elements of opportunity to be heard and to hear others, unique perspectives, and to rely on HLN as a resource for, a fair spectrum of the Latino population and the community at large.
Great, thank you. Group 2, I believe Sandra Gibson and Mr. Montes, John Montes, was in that group. Would one of you like to share what you discussed in your group?
I'll share. One of the things I think that this group is doing that's really important is provide a role model for our younger generation to see. I mean, I think it's important that they be able to see that someone of their same color can do some of the things such as Commander Soto is doing, some of the things like Dr. Newman is doing, some of the things like you, Elaine, is doing, that they can be successful and that they can do some of the things that they've dreamed about doing or they've been talked about doing. And so I think that's one of the things that we're doing that's very important, is provide a role model for our younger generation.
Great, thank you. I totally agree. Israel Lokaman, I think you were in group 3 with Christina Davis. Would one of you mind sharing out what you discussed in your group?
Yes, what HLN is good for the Waco community is other representation, other leadership that are being represented in the group, and how important it is even to seeing like the young community in Waco.
Great, thank you. In group 4, Mr. Thomas Howard, Teresa Chavez, Kyle Thomas, would one of you like to share out what was discussed in your group? And tell me who's talking too, so I can make you spotlight.
And in this case, these are the factors.
This is Howard Thomas. We talked about importance of inclusion, representation, and how that just produces inspiration and motivation for others to follow and aspire to.
Great, thank you. And in group 5, I believe Herman, you were in group 5, and Mark Salim.
Hey, John, just calling to ask you. I know that your case has already been
Yeah, so in our group, we talked about representation as well, and how this group can really help to just grow our leadership capabilities. And we're seeing what a neat thing is to have folks outside of Waco area, which is a good thing for us to see. I think we first saw this only for Waco, but due to the pandemic, we have adjusted as leaders, and good job, Elaine and Bridget, you guys, to broaden the horizons, use technology. Now we got folks down in Galveston County like Mark is, and outside of Waco. So I think we can really start to grow as leaders across the state and not let geography bind us in. So that's kind of cool.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And the last group, I believe it was Berta, Selena, Isabel Lozano, and Norma Soto. Isabel or Berta or Norma, would y'all like to share out what your group discussed?
Sure. We just talked about it's a great way to empower each other. I know Berta is an entrepreneur, and it's a great way for us to connect and support her business. Ms. Soto also shared that she is part of the Walmart Corporation and knows a lot of people, and she was asking, how can we help? And I actually gave her a couple of examples where they have already been helping through donating to the food pantry at Family of Faith Worship Center, and then they turn it back and donate some of those items that are donated to our campus. And so we're blessed that way. And it's a great way to network and empower each other.
Great, thank you, Isabel. I'm going to turn it back over to Angelo so he can close out. Everyone, thank you for joining us. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Angelo now so he can close out the program.
Yeah, so I want to thank you again, Commander, for joining us, and everyone for joining us, and especially Elaine and Bridget. I know you guys put in a lot of extra hours behind the scenes to make things like this run really smooth. I'm not sure who we have up next for our next one. Sorry, I closed out my notes here. But thank you all again. And Elaine, any final remarks?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Our next speaker will be Mayor Meek, will be our special guest speaker on Friday, February the 5th. Again, make sure that you are inviting your colleagues and your friends, and let's get as many people online to support him and his message, which I'm sure will just be inspirational as well. Again, thank you, Commander Soto. Thank you, everyone, Angelo, Isabel, and everyone else, Bridget, and everyone else that's online. Have a great day and have a great weekend as well.